Okay, we're going into the story here with TYT. Now, TYT has basically been the flagship network of progressive media. A lot of progressive shows came from TYT. And even in times when a lot of us have been very critical of the squad, TYT stood by them and defended them. But I think it has even reached a breaking point, even for someone like Cenk. Now, Anna was the first to speak out a couple of months ago, but now even Cenk Uygur just doesn't seem to have that hope for them like he did before. And he went as far as to actually criticize Bernie Sanders in this episode that was sent to me. And I think you guys need to see this. Now, this is called Congressional Progressives Make a Move. Is it for real? This is in reference to the wealth tax. Listen to this.
Progressive lawmakers in both the House and the Senate have proposed two pieces of legislation, with one focusing on a potential wealth tax and the other calling for a minimum wage hike, which, by the way, has not been done on a federal level for 14 years. Nonetheless, are these serious proposals, or is this just more theater from lawmakers, in this particular case, progressive lawmakers? That's what we're here to discuss and potentially debate. Now, let's start with the wealth tax. I wanna give you guys the details. It's super easy to understand, okay? They call it the Oligarch tax, or I'm sorry, Oligarch Act. And it was introduced just yesterday by Representatives Barbara Lee, Summer Lee, Rashida Tlaib, and Jamal Bowman. Now, instead of taxing a specific wealth threshold, they have decided to propose something that is way more easy to understand, not complicated at all, okay? They would tax the rich based on how much more wealth they have than the median American household. Apparently, the median American household currently is $120,000 in wealth. Okay, so here's how the four tax brackets would work should this legislation pass, which it most certainly will not, but nonetheless, let's take a look. So 2% for all wealth between 1,000 and 10,000 times median household wealth.
I'm gonna pause here because I wanna point out something here. This seems like a softer version of what we just did in Massachusetts. And I'll explain what I mean. This chart here, where it says 4% for all wealth between 10,000 and 100,000 times median household wealth. What we did here in Massachusetts is it's also 4%, but it's called the billionaire's tax. And it's not just based on your income, it's also based on your assets, like, right, what you own. So even if you don't earn $1 million annually, if you have at least a minimum of 1 million in assets in wealth, then you fell under that 4% of that millionaire's tax. Now, because we passed that here in Massachusetts, that means that was the money, some of the money that went towards providing free lunch for kids here in all the schools. So I talked about the free lunch thing that just passed here, but it came from that millionaire's tax. But from what I see here, for all wealth between 10,000 and 100,000 times median household wealth, now you're basically relying on the median household wealth, but define median household, because it's something to me that is just like when we say the median household income, right? Who does that really include? I could say the median household income of such and such state is $150,000. The problem with that, though, is all the people, like working class people and poor people, they don't fall into that 150,000 for the median household. They're not making that. They don't have $150,000 for their household. But the problem is when you lump all of the amounts together and you come up with the median, that's what the median is. So for me, I guess to make this more simpler, why didn't they just do the way we did it here in Massachusetts? I don't know. Let me just go ahead. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier just to say if you make a minimum of $1 million, or if you have assets, wealth that are at least $1 million, then you fall under the 4% wealth tax. I don't know. Let's go on.
4% for all wealth between 10,000 and 100,000 times median household wealth, and 6% for all wealth between 100,000 and 1 million times median household wealth, and 8% for all wealth over 1 million times median household wealth. Okay, I mean, very few people are at the top bracket there, but nonetheless, what do you think of this proposal, Cenk, before I move on to the
Okay, so to give you a sense, guys, of who this affects, it affects people with wealth over $120 million. That's the beginning part of their proposal as things stand today.
It's probably best to word it that way. Instead of like median household, this 2%, 4%, 8%, like it's probably best just to word it the way that he just said it.
That's why if this becomes a real issue and they're battling over this, which is unlikely, and that's part of the debate we're about to have, but you will hear Republicans say, oh, they're just trying to tax the average man. No, they're not. They're trying to tax people with more than $120 million, just so you understand. And I like the proposal because they're saying, hey, look, if we don't have income inequality, then this tax won't even exist, because then you won't have 1,000 times the wealth of the average household in America, let alone 1 million times the median household wealth.
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense as a way to structure a wealth tax, if you're gonna have a wealth tax at all.
So the tax is not pegged to a specific dollar threshold by design. This causes the tax to wax and wane with wealth concentration, intensifying during periods of rising inequality, but tapering off to near non-existence when median household wealth increases and inequality moderates to an acceptable level. So additionally, the Oligarch Act would require at least a 30% IRS audit rate on households affected by the wealth tax. So, I mean, I just think the IRS should audit people who are clearly filing tax returns that have some shady, like, red flags involved.
No, so they theoretically do, but they've been defunded by the Republicans so much that they don't. So in an ideal world, after a certain number, almost all of those folks would be audited because their taxes are so much. And this does have, theoretically, again, the way that the system was originally structured, you get more audited as your wealth goes up because there's so much more money to gain from when you catch people who are cheating, okay? So, but in reality, the people who get the earned income tax credit, who make the least amount of money in this country, are audited 5.5 times the average person. So,
true story. I was audited in grad school. Make that make sense. Why would you audit me as a student? I had a part-time job. I was working part-time. So why? It's most rare. But look, they will come after people like me, right? But the point of all this that I'm going to make, and they're going to get into as well, was that this is obviously not going to pass, right? Republicans have the majority in the House, and I don't even think the majority of Democrats in the House approve of this either. So this is obviously not going to pass. To that point, it was obvious that Medicare for All also was not going to pass in the House. And according to the squad, that's the reason why they said they did not force the vote, because it was not going to pass. But it's okay for them to force, to push other measures and other policies that are also not going to pass. Why didn't they do this when the Democrats had the majority in the House? And that's why some people will say, is this performative? Why didn't they do this back then? Why did they wait until the Republicans had the majority and try to pass all these type of progressive policies, which they know damn well is going to be dead in the water and is not even going to make it to the Senate? Why didn't they put those measures forth when the Democrats had the majority and Nancy Pelosi was speaker? That's why people say it's performative.
we over audit the poor and we under audit the rich. So what this act is saying is, at least 30% of these guys have to get audited at a minimum, right? So they're asking for the bare minimum there, if you ask me.
Now let's move on to what Bernie Sanders is proposing. He wants to increase the federal minimum wage, which still stands at $7.25. He wants to increase it to $17 an hour. And look, there are some states that have already, like California, for instance, has raised the minimum wage. And it's definitely higher in California compared to other states. But the point of raising the federal minimum wage to $17 an hour is that it increases the wages all across the board. It lifts all wages, so it makes a lot of sense. The question is, will that legislation pass? He proposed.
No, it won't. And Bernie knows it's not going to pass. Remember, just like Bernie decided not to bring the bill in reference to Yemen for them to pull out of Yemen, he decided last minute not to bring it to the floor for a vote because Joe Biden had already told him, don't do it, it's not going to pass. And Bernie knows this isn't going to pass either. This is just a way to show, listen, my progressive base, see, I'm still trying to do these progressive things that I told you about, even though I'm supporting Joe Biden, who does not approve of these things that we're trying to do. This is just a way to show them, like, look, I'm still trying to do something. Da, da, da. They didn't agree to pass $15 minimum wage in the Senate. So I'm supposed to believe magically they're going to approve 17? I don't think that's going to happen.
It as a United States Senator, of course, and Representative Bobby Scott is also involved in co-authoring and sponsoring this bill. And the bill would raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $17 per hour by 2028. So it wouldn't be an immediate increase in the minimum wage.
And by 2028, $17 an hour isn't going to be worth much a damn. Like, it's just, these are some of the things I really just don't understand. This makes me feel some type of way, because if you can just immediately give billions of dollars to Ukraine, you can just immediately go ahead and make that minimum wage $17 an hour and not have to over a period of time. I am wondering, and you guys tell me what you think of this. I'm honestly wondering if it is better off for the states to do this on their own, for the states to have a minimum wage. What do you think of that? And I say this because Massachusetts, we passed $15 minimum wage years ago. But what if every state in this country had their own required minimum wage, so that regardless if the federal government increases the minimum wage or not, the state has a minimum? Just something to think about. We got to start thinking outside the box, Maybe it could work, maybe it won't work. I don't know. But I know here in Massachusetts, we passed $15 minimum wage years ago. And so that's why I'm saying when they did that fight for 15, they were already like 4 years late. I don't know, man.
So let's get to the fun part now. Is this real, or is this just theater from progressives?
Well, I like it. And so is it the best they can do? No, not at all. And I'll get into in a little bit what they could have actually done to get some of this stuff passed. But I was worried they were doing absolutely nothing. And so what are we, this is July now? I mean, for 6-7 months, nothing proposed, no fight. So now that I'm seeing finally they propose something, I'll take it. I know the bar is super low, but even if it's a rhetorical fight rather than a legislative fight, because the Republicans are gonna block at least the wealth tax for sure, right? Well, at least you're bringing attention to the cause and you're showing where you stand. Now, of course, Anna's going to be right when she says, when push came to shove and they actually could have gotten some of these things done, especially the minimum wage, they chose not to fight. And so now this is not going to work at this point. By the way, it can. The minimum wage one can.
Yeah, I think that has. Look, I don't think the minimum wage is going to pass. I don't think that anyone is even going to fight to ensure that it passes, right? There's not going to be any pressure applied. And besides which, like, we're dealing with. Look, my biggest issue with this is that it is performative, and everyone involved knows it's performative, okay? And people want cookies for proposing legislation that A, they know has no chance of passing, B, they have no strategy in place to have it pass or attempt to get it passed.
Or no plan B. They don't have a backup plan when these things don't pass. What should the backup plan be? Hit the streets. Do you see the squad? Do you see them contact or tweet out and say, okay, guys, they shut this down. They're denying you a living wage. It's time to hit the streets. Do you see them doing that? They ain't even got to organize the protest. All they got to do is tweet about it. And people will organize on their own. But that should be the plan B. Even Bernie Sanders said, yes, we need Medicare for all. We got to fight for it. But we're also going to need thousands of people in the streets. So that's why I said when we had those marches for Medicare for all in over 50 cities across this country, we listened to that and we went out to the streets. But you guys are the ones who didn't show up. Bernie and the squad, you were the ones who did not show up. We were there. So for me, it's just, guys, we got to get this done in the States. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm so tired of the fact that it's been 14 years? How many years? 14 years since the minimum wage has been increased on a federal level. Like, why are we letting them play around with us like this? We got to get this shit done in the States. It's not just Massachusetts. California has done it. I think New York also increased the minimum wage. Why are we waiting on them? Let me go on here. We have a little bit more here. We get to the other Bernie part.
And when you look at the proposal here compared to what they were doing when Democrats had a majority in the House of Representatives, it gives you a sense of like how many people, aside from the co-authors, right? How many Democrats, knowing full well that there's no chance that this is gonna pass, sign on to legislation like this so they can get the cookies?
Oh, for sure.
Right.
But there's two things that come out of things that are performative in politics. One is you want to get cookies for not actually doing anything, but pretending you're doing something.
Exactly, and I'm sick of that.
And that's Anna's main point, and that is 90% of what happens in Washington, right? But there's a second reason for doing things that are quote unquote performative. So you draw attention to it. Once you draw attention to it, then you actually fight for it. So the question is, are they going to fight for it?
Define fight. Define that. What is fighting for it? Is fighting for it, like fighting for it legislatively? Okay, let's say it don't pass, which I don't think it will. Let's say it don't pass. What do you do then to fight? You got to hit the streets. And that's the part that they don't do. So that's the piece to me that's just like, it's a no-brainer to me.
So for example, if during the Build Back Better negotiations, they had fought tooth and nail for $15 minimum wage and they lost, and then they come back and do this, I go, oh, that's fantastic. You can't argue with that because they're trying as hard as they can to get it into legislation. They're using their power, and then they're being performative in a good way because they're drawing attention to it again and then fighting for it again. But if you didn't, but in this case, they didn't fight for it the first time when they had every opportunity to. So in a best case scenario, this is Bernie being Johnny come lately on his own proposal, right? He's the one that highlighted $15 minimum wage in the first place, right? And in a worst case scenario, it's the just Democrats in the House playing patty cakes when they got their ass handed to them in the actual negotiations, and they chose not to fight, they chose not to use their power, and so this is just marketing. So those are both possibilities. And we're always constructive here. So I'm gonna tell you one thing they could do and then I would ask you, Anna, if they did this, would you then say it's not performative and it's real? So if I'm Bernie, okay, you propose it. Well, you know it's not gonna pass because 8 Democrats voted against it last time in the Senate, let alone every Republican being opposed to it. So if you just propose it and then go home, well then I gotta be honest, it was useless. Anna wins the debate, okay? But if you propose it and then you go, okay, here's the 8 Democrats that voted against a minimum wage last time. Why did they do that? 2 of them are in Delaware. Delaware is a very blue state. Hey, voters of Delaware, you should vote these guys out.
Delaware is a credit card state, just FYI. But yeah, those people should be removed from office.
Bernie, you gonna do that? Because that would create tons of attention and use that attention to notice, hey, why are Democrats who pretend to be in favor of the minimum wage actually against it? They voted against it, both Carper and Coons did. 8 different Democrats did. Okay, so if you shame them, then we would have an actual national conversation because CNN would love Democrat on Democrat fighting, but you're doing it for the right reasons. to actually get a policy changed. You get the Democrats on board, and then you put pressure on the purple district Republicans in the House. You only need a couple of their votes. So I can show you an exact roadmap for how to get this done. Is Bernie gonna do it? He's your best chance, and the answer is very, 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 very unlikely, because he does not like to upset his Democratic colleagues.
Right, you have to use carrots and sticks. And the only time I see anyone in the Democratic Party using sticks is when corporate Democrats use sticks against progressive Democrats, which is why, look, she's the most notable. That's why she gets talked about the most. And she's made a lot of missteps, just keeping it real. Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, the sticks used by corporate Democrats toward her worked perfectly to the point. I mean, she voted in favor of Congress intervening to stop the rail workers from going on strike. She voted against the rail workers in that case.
No, I know. Believe me.
So like, I'm not interested. Listen, I am not interested in creating opportunities for corporate Democrats to sign on to let progress.
I think we need to stop calling them. I think they need to stop saying it in a way as if the corporate Democrats are separate from the squad. I mean, the squad votes along with the corporate Democrats, even when it's on policies that they're not supposed to do that. They're all together. They're all corrupt. They're all on the same team. You know, I mean, it's like if you played sports, like I played sports, like if you played sports, it's like my team wasn't separate. It wasn't like we had like, here's the basketball team, and then like 5 of you guys have your own team, and then here's the rest of the team. No, at the end of the day, we were all one team. And in order for us to win, we had to move together. And that's what they doing. They moving together with them. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, at this point, I mean, there really isn't that much of a difference.
Progressive legislation and pretend like they support that progressive legislation, knowing full well that because of the House Freedom Caucus and because of Republicans having control of the House of Representatives, it's never gonna pass. It's never gonna pass, but they want the cookies, they want the kudos. I'm not interested in the kudos, and I'm not interested in dealing with a party that, unlike the Republican Party, gotta keep it real, is so scared of any infighting, so scared of having to hold anyone accountable within their own party.
100%.
If there's no accountability and if there's no strategy, that's the main thing here. There's no strategy to get the actual proposals passed, then what are we having a conversation about?
Yeah, so.
Don't ask me, this was your guy, this was y'all's strategy. Like seriously, and then there was no plan B with that. Like when they started Justice Democrats, there was no plan B as to what would be the next steps once those candidates won. And from what I understand, it seems like once they got into Congress, like that was pretty much it. There was no more communication. They stopped going on to independent media. Like after they won, like there was no next step. So this whole strategy issue, especially if we're talking about plan B, it's not just an issue when it comes to the squad and Bernie Sanders, it's also an issue with the progressive media apparatus. You see how they go together? Where they get this from? Where they get this strategy issue from? Strategy.
Last two things here. One is important for me, and one's one devastating one for Anna. So performative can work. Remember when Cori Bush sat on the Capitol steps to make sure that they did not end the moratorium on the rent during COVID, and she won on that, at least for a period of time. Why?
That was already approved though, and Cenk knows that. They had already approved it.
Because she brought attention to it, and she embarrassed Biden, and Biden didn't want to be embarrassed, so he gave in. That's when performative is awesome. That's why I don't foreclose this as being a good thing. I think it could be a good thing. On the other hand, how much did they cave on $15 minimum wage when they could have fought? It's not theoretical, guys. There's actual facts. Even after they lost in the first COVID relief bill, while barely fighting, and by the way, the Young Turks audience had to shame Bernie Sanders into proposing it as an amendment. He was just gonna let Schumer take it out of the bill. That's just a fact. And by the way, Bernie Sanders won't come on any progressive shows anymore. I don't know, maybe he'll go on ones that promise him softballs. But he goes on Bill Maher, he goes on mainstream media shows, but he won't come on here because he knows we're gonna ask him, so what are you gonna do to pass it, Bernie? Is this just marketing? Or
that part right there, Bernie Sanders Listen to this, because I can't disagree with Cenk here. I'm surprised he said this, but I'm glad he said
Even
it.
after they lost in the first COVID relief bill, while barely fighting, and by the way, the Young Turks audience had to shame Bernie Sanders into proposing it as an amendment. He was just gonna let Schumer take it out of the bill. That's just a fact. And by the way, Bernie Sanders won't come on any progressive shows anymore. I don't know, maybe.
Nope. Bernie Sanders don't come on progressive media. Bernie Sanders don't go on to independent media anymore. The last independent media appearance he made was when he went on to Crystal Kyle and Friends, and he was only willing to do the interview if Kyle was not a part of the interview. And let me tell you, you got to be some kind of because that would not work on me. Because if you tell me, like if I had a co-host and you tell me the only way you're going to come on is if my co-host is not present, I would have just told you, well, I guess we're not doing the interview then. But no, they had to got to get those clicks. Because I'll be damned if somebody tell me that the co-host can't be present. How are you going to go into someone else's show and start calling shots? That right there should have told people exactly who Bernie Sanders really was. But he's right. And I'm glad he said that. Bernie Sanders don't go on to progressive media no more, independent media no more. Bernie Sanders act like he don't even know who you guys are. And a lot of you that started your shows on the Bernie movement spent years kissing Bernie Sanders' ass. And now Bernie pretends like he don't even know who you are. Bernie be in the back like, Kyle who? Crystal who? TYT who? Humanist Report who? He don't even know you guys. As many times as I sat down and watched these shows during Bernie's campaigns, there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't hear a story about Bernie where they were trying to get you to go out and support Bernie and they were praising Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders lost in 2020. Bernie Sanders lost in 2016. But after Bernie lost in 2020, Bernie packed up his bag and pretended like you guys did not exist. That is a kick in the face. And you see the squad followed that exact same playbook. After they got in, they didn't know you. Where's AOC been since she went on Jimmy Dore's show and Glenn Greenwald's show when she was running? Where's she been? She went on to The Lever on David Sirota's show, and David Sirota didn't even press her and push her. That's why she went on that show. That's a damn shame. Elizabeth Warren came on TYT. Bernie can't come on TYT. They used you, like I said, they need the media apparatus to support them and back them when they're running for office. But once they get in, they ain't got nothing for you either. He walked away from his movement, and when he walked away from that movement, he walked away from independent media as well. If I'm wrong, then prove me wrong. Let me know the next time you see Bernie Sanders on progressive media.
He'll go on ones that promise him softballs. But he goes on Bill Maher, he goes on mainstream media shows, but he won't come on here because he knows we're gonna ask him, so what are you gonna do to pass it, Bernie? Is this just marketing, or do you actually mean it? So last thing is, okay, they lost on COVID relief bill, but Chuck Schumer said something unprecedented. And he said it to The Intercept. The article's public, you could all see it. Ryan Grim interviewed him, and Chuck Schumer said, I will put $15 minimum wage in every bill going forward. That's a golden opportunity, golden. That's when progressives should step up and go, I agree with Chuck Schumer. It should go in every bill going forward, and we're not gonna vote for any of these bills unless it's got $15 minimum wage, and we have our beautiful ally Chuck Schumer with us. Now, why did Chuck Schumer do that? Because he was worried that AOC was gonna run against him in that Senate seat. But they took that power and leverage and they flushed it down the toilet. Not one progressive asked Chuck Schumer to ever put it in a bill again. That's a negligence and dereliction of duty beyond imagination. It breaks my heart to tell you that, but that's what happened. These guys, they don't know politics at all. So it's just incredibly dispiriting to see this happen. So
I'm sorry, but that's what you wanted. When you started Justice Democrats, that's exactly what you wanted. You were looking for people that had no experience in politics, although I would argue Ayanna Pressley did because she was city councilor here in Boston. but you wanted people that had no experience in politics. And that's what you got. Now you got people who got no experience in politics, but then in turn, you are supposed to teach them about politics. Seems like to me, the teaching part didn't happen. That's exactly what you asked for, Cenk. And sorry, but the ones who have been there since 2018, they've been there long enough to understand how politics works now. It just is what it is.
But by the way, to Bernie and to the Justice Democrats, I know you mean well. I'm not questioning your intent at all. So prove us wrong. Fight for these. The wealth tax is very, very difficult, but the minimum wage is incredibly popular.
How do you know that they mean well? How do you know they mean well? When's the last time any of them have been on TYT and had this conversation with Cenk or Anna? When's the last time? How do you know that they mean well? You know, it's just,
All you have to do is fight. Prove us wrong, fight. But my guess is Anna's right, you won't. It's just marketing.
And it's not, look, it's not aimless fighting, right? It's strategy. Develop a strategy. I don't even know if these people talk to one another.
No, that's why I mentioned the thing about Bernie not coming on.
Well, we know they don't talk to you. We know they're not talking to you guys. It's just, I don't, let me run this back because he was saying something else about Bernie. I'm sorry.
Anna's right, you won't. It's just marketing.
And it's not, look, it's not aimless fighting, right? It's strategy. Develop a strategy. I don't even know if these people talk to one another.
No, that's why I mentioned the thing about Bernie not coming on. I don't care about guests. Guests don't do well, honestly, in our version of ratings. So it hurts us to have guests on, but we do it so you guys can learn. So, but if the reason I mention it is because we would ask Bernie, what's your plan, brother? And no one else in media ever asked that. And he doesn't, if he's got a plan, execute it, prove us wrong, humiliate us. Get it passed, and we'll love you forever. We'll apologize profusely and say you're the world's greatest politician. But you know what you have to do to pass it. You have to aggressively, not mildly, not go on CNN and just say it once. You have to aggressively challenge your Democratic colleagues, and you will not do it under penalty of law. That's why nothing ever passes that's progressive. Thanks for watching The Young Turks.
Well, I'm just going to say this. At this point, I don't understand the point of Bernie Sanders even being in the Senate anymore. I really don't, because it's true. They're not going to fight. They just don't fight. They roll over. They're milquetoast. I just don't understand the point of him being there. At this point, Bernie Sanders will be better off just retiring. That's how I feel. But to me, it's just like I said before, they found out if they want to keep their seats that they have to go along with Democrat leadership. And if they disagree with Democrat leadership, there goes their seats. That's what happened to Cynthia McKinney, and that's what happened to Dennis Kucinich. They'll get rid of you. They'll get rid of you. They'll get you out. But it's true. That's why a lot of people like, well, no, candidates come onto this show. You don't really see politicians. Ro Khanna came on here. Other than that, candidates will come on, but politicians, for the most part, don't make their way onto this show. Because, and part of it is because, like, I do ask, like, what's the plan? And when you ask that question, what's the plan? They don't usually have an answer. There usually is no plan. So it's true. Bernie goes on to the shows that don't ask him. Cenk said people don't ask him what his plan is, right? Okay. So my response to Cenk would be, that's why Bernie goes on to those shows, because they're not asking him that. And they don't ask him that because they want to continue bringing him on. I just can't believe this is the same person that said we're going to start a revolution across this country. Man. Thank you for the super chat, Dante. Thank you, Sabs. God bless. Keep speaking the truth no matter how much the smear merchants eventually go after you. Yeah, people smear me a lot, and it's actually kind of stupid because it gives me more attention you're telling people, they tell people about this channel that didn't even know this channel existed. Someone came in one time in the chat and they said, I found out about you because someone was smearing you on their show. And I was like, okay, welcome. Like, I don't know what to tell people. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Roger. It's a mess out there, guys. It is a mess out there. Thanks so much, Roger. Cenk and Anna are millionaires living in a CBI state for amendments, complaining about what's not happening in DC. No, the question is, Cenk, are you going to fight for it? Nina, you too. Running for office while living in a CBI, Ohio, for amendments is really an exercise in their own ego. Run those initiative amendments, outlaw private equity from owning housing, CalCare, California State Public Bank. Bernie never been on indie media. Bernie was on, I thought Bernie was on TYT before, back in the day. But I will say something I was going to add, that we got to get this done through the states. Like, I'm sorry, but and Roger's right. They live right in California, which is a ballot initiative state. And I'm just telling you, it is what it is. But when it comes to this issue with the minimum wage, the wealth tax, we passed that here in Massachusetts, and it's already doing good things in reference to feeding the kids. So I'm here to tell you, when it comes to this minimum wage thing, if it has not been done in your state, fight for that shit in your state. How many states now in the US have $15 minimum wage past it? I'm trying to think. I know Massachusetts, California, and New York, I believe. I feel like there's others. Florida. So I want to tell y'all, people can continue to scream and yell at the camera and complain about what's not getting done in DC, but at the same time, tell people to get some of these things you can get done in the States. I don't know. Yeah, that's right. DG Daniels, Florida passed a minimum wage increase. That's right. We have another one. Washington. Okay. Thank you, Chastity. Yeah, he was on TYT twice. I thought he was on there before. I don't know, man. Get it done through the states. Get it done through the states. We could start a song. I could contact Jesse Jet and ask Jesse Jet if he can make a song called Get It Done Through the States. Get it done through the states. Get it done through the states. Make it kind of trendy. I know, Rick. I hear you. You can't even live on $15 anymore, Sabby. I hear you. I know. It's 14 years without increasing the minimum wage. That's insane.